Hello Vandals. So today we're going to be looking at camera setup and teardown, how to do it safely, what not to do, and the basics of camera operation. So we're going to start with the tripod. We use Sackler tripods in these cases. We have a couple other tripods in other cases. These are the main ones that we use for our hard cameras. These are two-stage ENG tripods. So ENG stands for electronic news gathering and is the blanket term for broadcast cameras in general. So when you open up this case, you'll see the tripod inside. You'll notice that the feet of the tripod always go towards the skinny end of the bag. The big head of the tripod goes towards the fat triangle part. So this is the two-stage tripod. This is the tripod fluid head. These are the pan arms here, and these are the legs. In between the legs, there are stabilizing thingies. So when you set this up, the first thing you want to do is pull it out and then loosen these handles on the sides. Bring these arms up and out and tighten them down again. You want to zoom in on this. So these are called ARRI standard mounts, I guess. But you'll see it's this alligator grill pattern, which means that when you tighten these down, you need to make sure that these teeth slot into each other, because if you tighten it down when the teeth are on top of each other like this, it won't seal properly, and then the first time you try to move it, it's gonna wiggle. And it'll wear those teeth down, which is a pain in the butt because that means we need to replace the ball head, which is pretty expensive. So make sure those teeth line up when you tighten down these handles. They don't have to be perfect for now, they just need to be out of the way. Then you can spread the legs out. You'll notice they don't spread out very far right now. That's because we have these spread arms in between the legs. These spread arms get loosened at each corner. And once those are loose, they allow you to spread the tripod out a little more. Make sure to tighten them down afterwards, otherwise the first time you move it, the arm will collapse and then you're gonna have a lopsided tripod. Next thing you can do is loosen all three clips that are holding on the first stage of legs. So you'll notice there's one set of clips up here. This is stage one. Another set of clips down here. That's stage two. Now, if you're setting this up in an area where you don't have to shoot over something like a railing, what you can do is release the first set of clips, then just lift it up, push the legs down, clamp the clips again, and then you're good to go. But if you need to go up higher, before you release the first stage, you can bring the tripod up like this and lay it down. And while it's laid down, you can release the second stage and then bring all of these legs out together to make sure they're even. Because if you set it up and then try and set up the second stage, you're gonna have a really hard time leveling it out properly. So even if the ball head looks level at the bubble, it'll be crooked when you pan it. So once you have that second set up, you can spread your legs out, release the first stage, bring this up, and now you have a tripod where all of the legs are elevated evenly. So now we're gonna talk about the fluid head. So we already talked about some of it. There's these ARRI mounts that hold the pan arms on. There's also a secondary adjustment on the pan arms that lets you slide them up and down. 90% of the time, you're gonna want these all the way out, since we'll be putting attachments on here that you're gonna want closer to your waist so you don't put strain on your shoulders. You'll notice that our fluid head is awful crooked right now. In here, there is a carpentry leveling bubble that you can use to check how level it is. In order to adjust that, there is this handle at the bottom. You'll notice that if you loosen this handle, you can move the whole fluid head around. So it's a good idea when you set up the tripod first to find the center of that bubble and tighten it down. Later on, we're gonna be putting heavy equipment on this thing, which means that the center of gravity is gonna change, so you'll likely have to adjust the bubble again. But having an even surface to start out with helps you make sure that all your legs are level. Other adjustments on the tripod are the tilt lock here. So if you loosen this towards you, you can move this up and down. If you lock it, you can't. When we have a camera built out on this, you always want to make sure to lock it anytime your hands are not on the camera. That's very important because since that equipment is so heavy, oftentimes if you unlock it, even if it's perfectly balanced, it'll start drifting backwards, which then, even though it's a safe tripod, introduces the possibility of equipment falling off and getting damaged. Then at the front here, we have your pan lock. So this is the locked position, which means we can't pan the tripod. That's the unlocked position, which means we can move it back and forth. To adjust the sensitivity of these movements, we have these dials. The higher the number, the more difficult that movement is going to be. So you notice this is awful stiff. When I'm panning, I'm almost moving the whole tripod. And then if we go down here to 1, it'll take a second, but now it's super wiggly. Same thing with the pan control. If you tighten it up, it gets stiffer, you're moving the whole tripod. Loosen it up, now you can whip it back and forth. Depending on what camera position you're on and what your assignment is, you're going to want a different level of sensitivity on these tripod heads. So if you're running the game cam and you have to be really steady and dependable pretty much 100% of the time, you're gonna want stiffer controls because that way it's a lot harder to jerk the camera into the wrong position. But if you're running something like a slash camera where you have to be whipping around and following action, you're gonna want a little bit of a lighter sensitivity. That way you can move around and follow the action without getting caught up on certain movements. Okay, so these are our hard cases. We have 3 of these Hitachi cameras. These cases are probably our most valuable equipment. Each of these cameras, a full build, will run you about 50 grand on the used market nowadays. So it's really important to keep these safe. But it's also important to be safe when you're around them. These cameras weigh, when they're in their case, it's about 45 to 50 pounds. So you want to make sure that if you're on a hard camera position, and really if you are doing broadcast work in general, that you have closed-toed shoes, so if you drop one of these on your foot, you're not gonna cut yourself up. These case latches are, I don't know what you would call these, lever latches or something, but you just twist them and they release the clamp. There's 4, 2 on the front, 1 on each side. Once they're loose, you can open this up and we have our camera gear. So you have your camera with your lens. The lenses always stay with the camera with the lens cap on when they're in the case. You have your broadcast monitor, you have your focus control, your zoom control, your microphone. This is your focus control cable. And then in this bag here, we have our intercom headsets. So when you open this up, you just want to make sure everything's in here, that you don't have like 3 microphones or 2 zoom controls or something. And then once you have all that, you can start building your camera. So the first thing you want to do is pull the camera out. This is a Hitachi Z HD 5000. You can look up the camera specs if you care. But on the bottom of these cameras, there is this ENG plate. So this thing just secures it to the camera. This is the actual part that attaches to the tripod. So you'll notice here on our tripod, we have this square that coincidentally perfectly matches. There's a pin here. You need to ease the camera down onto this pin in order for the mechanism to clamp onto it. Once this clamps onto it, it won't be able to move. If you're having issues with this, in order to release the mechanism, you come under here. This is called an earthquake pin, which is just the industry standard term for it. It's really just like a safety pin. You pull this down, then you can move this lever out, which adjusts the plate, and then the pin will pop back up. So when you play, so now that we have our camera, in order to put it on, we just line it up, put the front in, and then ease it down onto that pin. it'll lock into place, and now you have your camera firmly secured to your tripod. Next thing you want to put on is the monitor. So this is the thing I see most oftenly adjusted incorrectly. It's got a pizza? It's got a pizza slice on the bottom of it that lines up with the pizza box on the top of the camera. In order to put it on, you just line it up, press it forward until it clicks, then it's securely placed in there. You'll notice, unless you're 3 inches taller than me, this is kind of a bad viewing angle for your monitor. In order to adjust that, twist these knobs on the side. They actually twist in opposite directions. So in order to loosen this one, you twist it forward. To loosen this one, you twist it backwards. Once those are loose, you can bring the monitor up into that J-hook area, tighten it down again, and adjust it as desired. If you're especially short, one trick you can do is loosen these after you've brought the monitor up, and then lower it again. And you have the clip thing behind the monitor mount. So now if you're quite short, you're down here and you have a at least half decent viewing angle. In order to connect the monitor, you need the viewfinder cable. This plugs into the viewfinder port on the camera. So the strange looking one will line up exactly like that and just slot in. And then the round port will go into the viewfinder in spot on your monitor. In order to get it to line up, there's a bunch of little slot things on it that you don't super need to worry about. Just lightly press against this and twist until it connects. You'll hear a little click and then the collar will slide down. Everything on the camera is powered off of the one SMPTE port, so you don't need to worry about external power, at least when we're in our standard locations. Next thing you want to set up is your focus handle. So these handles, you'll see, use the same airy mounts that our pan arms do. In order to move them around, you just loosen them and then you can swivel them. Again, make sure that when you tighten it down, you don't have those teeth gnashing into each other. Otherwise, as soon as you try to move it, it's gonna slip. Now this is mostly up to preference, but the industry standard is that the focus goes on the underside of the left pan arm. So in order to get it there, we want the clamp portion to be at a right angle with the attachment, and then we can loosen this. These are kind of finicky. They require a lot of adjustment as you set them up, but once you figure out what you like, it's pretty easy to get back into place. So the way that this clamps down is that you have that diamond shape in there that clamps onto the arm, and then these bits slot in and tighten down in order to secure it. I want to loosen this quite a bit. Here we go. So when you come over to the pan arm, what you do, put one diamond half there, and then hamburger the clip on. Make sure this is loose enough that this can get into the slot, and tighten it back down to secure it. So now you have your focus attachment secured to your pan arm, but you'll notice there's no way for it to actually interface with the camera, which is why we need this attachment. So it's got two square pins. These pins slot into the focus handle and the lens independently so that you can move the focus on the lens. This is actually a giant spring that is coiled up inside here. So when you twist one side, the other side twists. Because this is a spring, it's really important that this never gets folded back on itself. Otherwise, the internal spring will actually kink, and then it'll start moving things really weird, and it's kind of expensive to replace. So just make sure that this is always either flat or only minorly bent like this. So you notice that when you're moving this around, since it's a spring, these pieces actually can slide back and forth in the camera, which means that sometimes when you try to slot it into its hole, this will just kind of recess and it won't extend far enough to connect. So a trick you can do is just with your finger, push in one side, so then when you put in the other side, that square will always be in the right place. If it's not slotting in, you can just twist this handle to adjust it. And then when you feel that kind of engage, you can tighten down the collar. It doesn't need to be super tight, just get it to the point of, I would say, reasonable firmness. That's an important rule for kind of all of this equipment. So these pan arms are made of aluminum, so it's not as big of a concern, but a lot of modern tripods use fiberglass a lot in their construction, which means that if you have something with this much clamping force, if you tighten it down too much, you can actually bend or break stuff. So everything wants to be tightened to reasonable firmness, not over tight. Once you have your focus control secured to the handle, you can plug it into the focus outlet that is up here. You'll notice, okay, I nailed it first try, but let's pretend that it isn't going in. It's not going in. One trick that you can do is while you're plugging it in, go down here to the focus control and twist this. That'll twist the pin and allow it to slot in properly. And then you can secure the collar. So next we'll look at the zoom control, which is this doohickey here. You'll notice it's got a cable permanently attached to it. So when you store this, you want to make sure that it's not at a weird angle that's going to pull on it. Same thing as the focus control. In order to attach it, you want to make sure that the clamping attachment is at a right angle. Again, it's up to preference whether you want your zoom handle above or below your handle. I prefer it above because then I can lower this and have a little more strain relief on my shoulder. Make sure to loosen your hamburger clip, and then you find the alligator teeth and chomp onto your handle, tighten it down, and now you have your zoom control secured to your pan arm. This cable is very long, so if you plug it straight into the lens, there is risk of it getting entangled on things down here, and then you're pulling on your lens strange. So just loop it once around the handle, kind of have it go through this channel, and then find the arrow on your cable and plug it facing outwards into the lens port. It can go into any of 3 of these lens ports. I typically just put it into the closest one. And now you have your zoom handle attached. Next is the microphone. This is a shotgun mic with a XLR cable. The XLR cable plugs into the shotgun mic about like you think it would, like that. Once you have that, you put the attachment into the cold shoe on top of the camera, tighten it down, make sure it's not going anywhere. Once you have that, this XLR cable plugs into the front of the camera, just like that. Sometimes we'll have a shotgun mic that actually needs to be powered on. They should be on most of the time since they're running off of phantom power off the camera. But if we're not getting audio from your camera, that would be a good thing to check, is just to power that on. Last thing is the intercom headset. These will come in double ear or single ear, depending on what position you're at. Once you have the cable unraveled, just find the little slot on the front of it. This right here is your intercom with the push sign. The slot just goes right under the push sign. Just like that. And your intercom's connected. If you're gonna leave your camera, you can just sling your intercom headset over a handle like that. So the last thing you need to do in order to get your camera online is to attach the SMPTE fiber cable. This is arguably the most expensive part of the camera, because if this fiber chain gets messed up, it's a whole pain in the butt to fix. So here on the back of the camera, you have your SMPTE fiber port, you'll notice that inside the connections, it's really just 2 fiber lines that connect to each other. This carries power, bidirectional video, bidirectional audio, and intercoms, which means it's a one-size-fits-all cable for the entire setup. In order to attach it, you find the red line here, find the red dot on the plug, and you connect it until it clips. It's really important not to yank on this and not to just force it into place, because those pins can get bent, and again, it's really expensive to fix. Even these small cables will run you upwards of $1,000. One trick that we have been doing recently to relieve some strain on the cables is running the cable underneath and over the camera, like this. That way, when you plug it in, when you move the camera around, this part is the only part of the cable that's moving, not the part that's actually connected to the camera. In order to unhook the SMPTE cable, this is really important, there is a collar system inside this rubber that you need to squeeze in order for it to release. So what you do is you make sure your camera is locked, you grab the bottom of the cable, right? The bottom of this collar, grab the part that is connected to the camera and squeeze it down without pulling. So you're forcing up with this thumb, pulling down with this one. You'll notice that it exposes that red line connected to the dot. Once that is exposed, you can pull the cable out. If this is connected and you just try to pull the cable out with force, it's gonna be really difficult. You will get it eventually. Like if you just do that, it will technically work, but it's bad for the cable, so don't do that. But once this is connected, the only other thing you have to do is go to this switch on the side, flip it down to CCU, and provided your CCUs in the control room are powered on, which they aren't currently, everything will boot up, you'll get a picture, you'll get intercom signal, and you'll be ready to go. So that is our full ENG camera build. Most important things are, first, safety of you, right? You wanna make sure that you're not going to hurt yourself when you're setting this up. The best way to avoid hurting yourself when you're setting something up is to ask for help. So if you're hauling one of these heavy cases up the stairs in MEM Gym and you can't quite handle it, just ask for help. Second thing is safety of equipment. Again, if you're hauling these cases up MEM Gym and you're taking 2 at a time and you're not quite strong enough to take 2 at a time, just drag one up, because the last thing we want to do is drop one of these cases down the stairs and all of a sudden I have to blow my entire budget on a new ENG camera.